Hello, and welcome to the December Third Thursday program presented by the Hoover Presidential Foundation. I'm Jerry Flegel, President and CEO of the Foundation, and I'd like to start by thanking our partners in this program, the Herbert Hoover National Historic Site, the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum, and the West Branch Public Library. We're also pleased to welcome our public library partners from across the state, which you will see on your screen. Together, this group is expanding tonight's message all across Iowa and setting records for Hoover program registrations. We're so glad you could all join us this evening. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, we've sought out and found other ways to bring you quality programs like this one via the internet. I'd like to encourage you to regularly check our website and Facebook page, as well as those of the library, historic site, and your favorite public library, for special program offerings that will pop up in the months ahead. In fact, registration is now open for the January 21st Third Thursday program about the origins of the presidential cabinet with Dr. Lindsay Chervinsky. The program will be especially timely as several nominees for President-elect Biden's cabinet will be going through the venting and hearing process then. I'm also pleased to tell you we have speakers lined up for all 12 months in 2021 for our Third Thursday program, and we even have a few bonus programs with Hoover family members as well. Keep an eye on our website, hooverpresidentialfoundation.org, for those details. I also want to tell you about two other programs that we have coming up in the next few months. First, we are accepting nominations for Uncommon Public Service amongst our state legislators. The Uncommon Public Service Award was created to honor those public servants and who demonstrate uncommon service to the people of Iowa above and beyond their legislative responsibilities. Just visit our website under the Grants and Awards tab to enter your nominations for a state representative, a state senator, or both. The deadline is March 1st. And the other program I would like to make you aware of is the Hoover Uncommon Student Awards. It is especially exciting because we will deliver over $60,000 in scholarship funding to 15 Iowa high school juniors who create and run a community service-oriented project of their own design next year. The 15 finalists will each earn $1,500, and 4 of those will earn an additional $10,000 scholarship each. It is only for Iowa high school juniors, and you must apply by March 15th. You can find details under the Grants and Awards tab on our website, or visit uncommonsstudent.org for more details. I'll hope you tell everyone you know about these two great programs. Now, as for tonight's webinar, we invite you to enter questions at any time during the program through the Q&A feature you will find along the edge of your screen. You may also vote for questions someone else has entered if you'd also like to hear those answered. As we may not have time to answer all the questions provided, top vote getters will get asked first. Tonight's presentation is called the 1929 Christmas Eve White House Fire. This program tells the little-known story about an inferno that destroyed President Hoover's executive offices during most of his presidency. Hoover archivist Craig Wright has researched this story and will share it with you tonight. Before starting work at the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library in 2004, Craig worked for the Minnesota Historical Society. Now, Craig has degrees in Russian and Eastern European Studies and Library Science from the University of Michigan. He spends most of his time at the library supervising and managing digital projects. Files have been shared with people all over the world, including recent projects for researchers in Japan, England, and at Yale University. I don't know if Yale University is formed, but some people may say it is with as much snow as they got out there tonight. But anyway, Craig, it is so great to have you here tonight with us.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. As I say, I'm Craig Wright, supervisory archivist at the Hoover Presidential Library. Thank you all for tuning in, and thanks to the Hoover Presidential Foundation for giving me another opportunity to share a Hoover story. The research for this story comes almost entirely from newspaper accounts, as we have very little in our library beyond that. Even our photographs about the fire are actually from the Library of Congress. However, we do have two pieces of the story from oral histories of people who were there. So let's begin. And I selected this initial image because it represents where most of the action takes place. You can see the White House in the background where the party was going on. And in the foreground, you see the West Wing, or as more commonly known in Hoover's time as the executive offices. If you look to the right of the West Wing a little bit, you can see a fenced-in area. That's actually where they hung the laundry to dry. And then fans of the White House might notice something unusual with this picture. The rounded wall that indicates the Oval Office is not at its current location, as we'll see on the next slide. And here you see in the black and white floor plan where the Oval Office was during the Hoover administration. Unfortunately, it was not wheelchair accessible. So during Franklin Roosevelt's administration, it was moved to its current location that you can see there in the colored floor plan. The executive offices were built in 1902 during the Theodore Roosevelt's administration, and they were intended to be temporary office structure built on top of the site of greenhouses and stables. Early in the Hoover administration, there was some renovation done in the executive offices. They excavated a partial basement and created supporting steel structures there. And so $60,000 had been spent on renovation that lasted 7 months until the events that begin in the next slide. Christmas Eve, 1929. As dusk fell, Herbert Hoover lighted the community Christmas tree, and that was followed by a concert by the Marine Band, and there were about 2,000 people who were in attendance. Richard Houlihan, who is the Washington bureau chief of the New York Times, left work a little after 7 o'clock, telling his reporter, Turner Catledge, "This is my story for the day. I'm going home to have Christmas Eve with my children. Don't call me unless the White House burns." And a little bit an hour later, Turner Catledge phones, "Mr. Houlihan, the White House is on fire." Now, quick note about Turner Catledge. Herbert Hoover actually had a hand in, he had been a reporter, but Hoover had a hand in him getting a job with the New York Times. Hoover had written a letter to the publisher of the New York Times after he was so pleased with the coverage that Turner Catledge had of the 1927 Mississippi flood that Hoover was involved in. And of course, the fire starts. It was reported, the alarm went off at 8:09. There is some discrepancy amongst the newspaper accounts as to who actually saw it first. One says it was the telephone operator, and another says it was Sergeant Trice of the White House Police Department. But regardless, within 15 minutes, several thousand spectators had arrived to watch the fire, most of them who had been attendees at the earlier tree lighting. It seemed to be fairly quickly contained. After about a half an hour, the firemen thought that the fire had been contained, and as you can see on the lower part of the headline there, under control once it breaks out anew. Initially, the fire and smoke was coming from the top floor, as you can see in the picture there, but when it broke out anew, it was coming from everywhere, including the basement windows. And then there was a number of challenges, as we'll see in the next slide. First, it was 24 degrees. So as the fire from 25 to 30 hoses shooting water onto the fire, that was freezing on the ground. And there are accounts about firemen who would slip and fall on the ice. But even more dangerous, the rungs of the ladders got wet and froze over as well. So I can't imagine wanting to be on top of the ladder there trying to fight that fire. I'm a fairly clumsy guy, so that would not have had good results. Darkness, the electricity obviously got cut out to the building, and as a temporary help, over 100 flares were lit to help the firemen see what was going on until some searchlights arrived. always a danger in fire was the smoke, and 2 firemen had some issues with the smoke and had to be treated and sent to a local hospital. Other than those 2 folks, the only problems were some minor cuts. So that was overall, considering all the dangers involved, I think that ended up being fairly safe. I was surprised there's not more casualties. But as you can see, it ended up being a 4-alarm fire, 130 firefighters, 19 engine companies, and 4 truck companies with 25 to 30 hoses spraying water into the building. The cause, no one knows what the cause was. That they tried an investigation later and they could not actually identify, but there were several theories, and one was that it started with a short circuit in the electrical system. Another was a spark from a flue in Secretary Newton's office. And another was that cleaning supplies stored in various rooms in the building spontaneously, well, probably not all of them spontaneously combusted, but perhaps one of them did. And if we go to the next slide, most of the records and important furnishings were removed in time before the fire got to them. In the president's office, only his beloved desk was left behind, covered with a tarp. They got all the other records out in time. There's a number of interesting stories about the telephone operator. As it says there, he stayed in the basement. There's, not surprisingly, numerous calls coming into the White House, wondering what's going on and trying to get updates. Well, he stayed, as the firemen were fighting the fire, he stayed at the phone, manning the phone, till the water got a foot deep. Then another story says that the phone in Hoover's office was still working, and he went up and was manning the phone in Hoover's office until the smoke got so bad he basically had to leave. Not surprisingly, the president's flag was saved. There's 2 different accounts. One of them was, the fellow listed in the previous slide there. H.L. Macy of the White House Guards, but another account said it was saved by fireman Fred Stone. But everyone asks and mostly talks about the party, which we'll look at the next slide. That was for the Hoover staff and their children, and I've managed to compile as good a list as I could get from the various newspaper accounts. The Akerson, Newton, Strother, and Kellogg families were secretaries and Hoover's sort of right-hand men. Joel Boone was the presidential doctor, and then Lou Henry Hoover's niece and nephew from her sister Jean. Delano and Jeanette were there as well. So they were all enjoying themselves, eating dinner, and as the story goes, they were having dessert in the state dining room when Ike Hoover, who is not related to the first family, the chief usher of the White House, came in and whispered to one of the secretaries that there was a fire. The secretary left the party and went to the window and saw that it was serious indeed. And so Ike Hoover was sent back in and whispered to the other men at the party, and they all got up and left to try to help save things. Herbert Hoover himself was escorted by 2 Secret Service men as he went to do what he could to help. Now, as they were concerned about the children obviously getting upset or worried, well, the Marine Band continued to play Christmas carols to drown out the noise from the fire engines outside. After dessert was finished, Lou moved the group to a hallway where there was a large Christmas tree to start the ceremonial passing out of presents to the children. And they were entertained during the party by Charles Field. Charles Field actually happened to be one of Herbert Hoover's classmates at the pioneer class at Stanford University. He had a I guess at the time, a fairly well-known radio program called Cheerio, and he had a character Cheerio that presented this. Well, he would go around to various events and appear as the character Cheerio. I'm curious. I want to follow up when I can get back in the library when COVID's over and try to find out if this guy was dressed as a clown or what. But he certainly stayed and helped keep the kids entertained. After the presents had been handed out, Lou moved the group into the East Room and decided, I would like to tell you children a secret. Do you want to know where your fathers are? Yes, yes. Well, their offices are on fire, so they've gone to help the firemen. Would you like to see the fire? And the accounts are the children are all, yes, of course the children want to go see the fire. So they went out to the West Terrace and looked at the fire through the window. But Lou is credited repeatedly in the press at job well done at keeping the children calm and relaxed while all this was going on, you know, pretty darn close. Okay, next. Now, here's one of the interesting things when you do historical research, and it's not just when you're with newspapers, but I thought this might be a nice illustration because what did Herbert Hoover do? The top talks about him personally going in and rescuing his private papers, and the middle two talk about him superintending or overseeing the rescue of the documents, and the bottom one, it's almost a secondary thought. Well, AIDS braved the smoke to save his papers. Well, regardless, it's very well known that it was Secretaries Akerson, Ritchie, and Hoover's son Allen who went into Hoover's office and managed to remove all the documents and make sure they were safe. There is one account about Allen being particularly enthusiastic in this work, and he had to eventually be restrained from going back into the dangerous areas of the fire. Next. Here are actually a couple of interesting pieces in our museum. And well, that night, after the fire was put out around 11 o'clock, there were 50 soldiers who stood guard over the smoldering remains of the executive offices. It's not really known how many documents might have been lost or how valuable they might have been. There's different accounts of that. But anyone that's had details, it fortunately didn't seem like anything terribly important was lost. These two pieces, as it says, documents cluttered the lawn. Well, Secretary of the Interior, Ray Lyman Wilbur, who was also a professor at Stanford and a long-standing Hoover friend, found these two documents on Christmas morning on the lawn of the White House, and he'd saved them. And I did find the letter that he sent these two documents to Herbert Hoover in 1946. Evidently, he was keeping them as a memento for a while because certainly 1946 is a little ways down the road there. And the next day, continuing, go ahead, the next slide. Hoover, you can sort of see at the top, he's at the top of the building there. Hoover does a very extensive inspection of the building. And here's where he ignored numerous warnings because large parts of the building were completely unstable and they were warning him to stay out of certain areas. And we do know that Hoover, in this case, ignored them to sort of inspect the damage personally. And that's a nice picture of them on the roof, because initially the only way to get to the fire was for the firemen to break through those windows on the top, and flames would shoot out and they would get their water down there. And on Christmas Day, obviously his office had been destroyed, so he moves his office to the Lincoln study. And that is the first official business conducted in that room since Lincoln was alive. You know, the next picture, I've got a couple more images of some of the cleanup work that was done the days shortly after of the fire. Again, another rooftop shot, but the one on the left is actually identified as Hoover's office. They said that when you would go in there, you could see the sky because the holes in the ceiling and the room above were so large you could see the sky above. Next. So he did, as I mentioned here, on Christmas Day, he moved his work office to the Lincoln Study. He did that while he was waiting for people to leave the offices that he was going to actually do business from until the West Wing was rebuilt. He's actually used the office. General Pershing was Hoover took over his office, and you can see it only took him a couple days. But I find it interesting, the State War and Navy building was described in several of the accounts as one of the most hideous buildings in Washington. And Hoover, not happy with the desk, General Pershing's desk, it turns out that his old desk had suffered only minor damage. They cleaned it up and they moved his old desk into his new quarters. And also when you do research, you often get more questions as you do research. Well, they kept talking about how Hoover had an extensive buzzer system of some sort that was associated with his desk. That's another thing I'm actually really interested in investigating when I'm allowed back in the library, because I would like to find out details about what this buzzer system was. The Congress acted quickly. There's no insurance for federal buildings. Congress has to allocate money for them, and they did not waste any time. And I believe it was about $100,000. Estimates vary, but about $100,000 to fix all the damage that had been done. And it was in April that Hoover moved back into the West Wing. And as part of the rebuilding, cooling device, air conditioning had finally been added to part of the White House. This was the third building in the government offices. And first was the Senate, and the second was Senate chambers, and the second was the House chambers. And one person at the time quipped, well, they had to go first because there was a lot more hot air there. Okay, next. And here, as a memento, the 1930 White House Christmas party invited basically the same children were there. And this is an example. They gave a metal fire engine toy as a memento and remembrance from the fire the years before. Our museum actually has 3 of them, but I like this picture as it's displayed in our museum, because it's got that little context. It's got that same photo in the background there. Another remembrance in the next slide. In 2016, the White House Historical Association created this Christmas ornament, obviously based on that. It was the first time that that had been going on, I believe, for 30 years in the White House Historical Association. This is the first Christmas ornament that was actually designed by a student, Kayla Whalen. They had done a national competition, and she won the competition, and obviously this is her ornament. So she personally got $5,000, and there was a $50,000 scholarship given to her school, the Montserrat College of Art in Massachusetts. And it's sort of a short story, but go ahead to the next one. I did find a couple of other pieces I liked as we get to the question stage here. On the left there, I did find that was the illustration that was used for the Hoover's 1929 Christmas card. There's a notation on the back that they ordered 75 of them. So if you're one of the Hoover's 75 closest friends, you got one of those. And I did also like the cartoon on the right, where it mentions that It's just the positive one. You can sort of see the little picture of Lincoln in the background, but it says, Christmas at the Hoovers means a tree, decorations, gifts, color, and gaiety. So I know it's a sort of a short story, but I do like it. I hopefully you enjoyed it as well. Have we gotten any questions?
Well, Craig, that is a terrific presentation about kind of a little bit little known history, you know, that is shared on that. So that is terrific. We've got one question to start off with. Why did they move to the State War and Navy building from the Lincoln Study? Do you know why they did that?
Okay, I think I can answer that because the accounts are when he was in the Lincoln Study, remember he has all of his secretaries had their own offices too. So their desks were cramming the hallway outside. So it's not really conducive, didn't have enough space to do business properly, which actually that's what Teddy Roosevelt said in 1902, which is why they were so crammed at doing business in the White House itself. That's really why they had to expand and add that office space. So they knew it was a temporary solution because I can't imagine trying to get down a hallway with 3 desks in it.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes it's a little crowded there at the library, or kind of like that.
Well, you know, we have to social distance now.
That's true. That's true. Well, I do have a question. You know, a couple firemen were nicked, but no guests or others were injured then, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And they did say that a few of the people who were pulling out, you know, the documents and, you know, the artifacts that they were trying to save from the fire, a couple of them had received some minor cuts and abrasions. And I mean, it wasn't any significant. Probably some of the metal was hot. So there was a minor, that's what that was to describe, minor burns. So no, I think it's great that, you know, considering how large and that the fire was, it was great that nobody really got hurt. I mean, both the firemen recovered in short order as well. So.
Well, and of course, you know, Herbert and Lou Henry Hoover had 2 children, Alan and Herbert, and they were obviously. I think they had actually started families themselves, haven't they? Because they would have probably been in what, their late 20s.
Herb Jr. had 3 children, but Alan was, and you can see sometimes in the social pages in Washington, the most eligible bachelor in Washington at the time. If I recall correctly, he got married in 1937.
Okay, very good. So were there any Hoover grandchildren there?
They weren't. None of them were listed.
Okay.
Which is actually another interesting point. But none of the newspaper accounts mentioned that the grandchildren were there.
Okay. Well, then Angela's got a question. What is on the seat of the 2016 commemorative ornament?
It's on.
There it is, right there.
I think that's supposed to be pulling a Christmas tree.
Oh, okay.
That looks like they're delivering a Christmas tree to the White House, maybe.
Okay. Now, and then there's somebody you know asked a question. Isn't Hoover's desk and chair on display at the FDR Museum in Hyde Park? And why is that?
Oh my! Now that's where you get into our museum curators. I believe the answer to that is, you know, Roosevelt used it. It's like you take all your furniture out with you, and they got to it first, I guess. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, and of course, Leslie Hoover-Laval is on tonight, and she goes, I've heard a story that Lou Henry used some of the salvaged wooden beams. She took these to Veterans Hospital where some were made into toys and other wooden artifacts. Do you know if
that is correct? Oh, that's a really interesting piece. I'm sorry I left that out. But yeah, they had, I believe Tom, if anyone's interested, I believe Tom did a Hoover Head about it some time ago where they actually had things made from the wood and given as presents. Yes.
Okay, very good.
Thank you for that nudge.
And Marietta asked, was there a fireproof safe in the building?
Yes.
Okay.
There was accounts where they would go into a room and there was a safe that had everything inside of it was still fine. So that if it wasn't fireproof, at least it survived the fire. But I assume that it was.
Well, great. And Julia asked, was there anything of particular note that is known to have been destroyed in the fire?
No, that's the few things I found that well, obviously furniture and such. I mean, Hoover's and the secretaries, and there was a press office as well. And I don't know specifically what they had, but they did say that, you know, the press wasn't in there at the time, so they had personal effects that were in there. But you know, it's really, I think a lot of the long-term historical value stuff really wasn't in the office buildings. It's sort of like your day-to-day work files that are in there, as opposed to, you know, the Constitution or anything that would be,
Absolutely.
you know, really egregious if we lost.
Yep. Okay. Well, and Leslie Hoover Lobel also just chimed in. She goes, my dad, who had been, you know, was a grandchild, or no, was a
Yeah,
grandchild.
grandson.
And his siblings were at the party. In fact,
Oh, very good. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, great granddad is holding my dad up in the tree in the sketch. So Herbert Hoover is grandson. So isn't that cool?
That is great.
Anyway, so
now that's only a good reminder that there's going to be some special events coming up talking with the Hoover family. So you're going to get more
there is
like that.
And kind of let the secret out is one of the things that we're going to be doing this winter and spring is having, I call, bonus programs with Hoover family members on various topics. So it's going to really be a lot of fun and interesting and so forth like that. And of course, Leslie is actually on tonight. Leslie will be doing Lou Henry Hoover's birthday on March 29th. So that'll be one you definitely won't want to miss. And we'll have that. We'll have more out on that too. But somebody also asked then, Craig, didn't Lou usually design the Christmas cards for the Hoover family?
She certainly, I think, had a role in that. Yep. And we have a number where they actually have several drafts or what have you. Some of them are quite clever, where they have I think there's one where they mention all the kids names, and then they have it signed by one of their dogs, has a paw print on
it. Interesting. So, well, and then given today's environment, it's kind of interesting that the suggested fire causes did not include sabotage by a political party. Was there anything with that? And of course, obviously, there's things going on over in Europe with Germany and so forth like that. Or are there any such reports that you've ever found in the library on that?
No, I've never found anything this early. I mean, I know occasionally there were concerns later in, I think as the Depression went on, there were some concerns that and more threats, obviously. But it's interesting. I don't have a lot of knowledge on that because those threats were like forwarded to the Justice Department, so we don't actually have the actual letters, but we just have sort of an annotation saying, this letter from such and such threatening the president was forwarded to the, and I think, anyway, regardless, I do know there was one report later in his term of office, I think when he went back to California to vote in 32, where they suspected there was some sabotage on one of the railway lines, but it actually wasn't the line that Hoover was using.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And there was a report in when he did, this is while he was president-elect, he did his Central and South American tour, and there was a report of an assassination attempt. I believe it's Chile, if I remember correctly, but again, it wasn't dangerous at all because they found out these people before Hoover even arrived in the country. So, but no, did not see anything that suggested the fire was caused by any unhappy people. Although reminiscent of today's thing, I do notice that after the stock market crashed, there's a number of letters that are sent into the Hoover from the public, and they have a lot of very interesting theories in there about how, maybe it was the opposing party that caused the stock market crash. And so that was very reminiscent of, I'd say, more current. I think the question that was sort of about what kind of echoes of our current situation did you see back in Hoover's time? And that was probably the strongest one, because there were a lot of interesting and being nice about it, I guess. In my mind, there's sort of harebrained ideas about what caused the Depression, but no shortage of that.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of Secret Service detail, you mentioned a couple Secret Service agents were with President Hoover. What was the size of a normal detail, or might have been on hand that night? I mean, now comparison, it would have been probably dozens of agents in present day, but.
Oh gosh, yeah, I don't know. My guess would be two, but yeah, I have to do a little research on that, and we don't have a lot of detail on some of those things. We do get questions like that about staff, and I do think I could probably track that down. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was probably, those. There might have been someone else, but there's no mention of other Secret Service people.
Okay.
That might have been his detail. It sort of alludes to another thing that was unusual for the time. It's not related to the Christmas story. There was a woman who essentially, it wasn't hard. There was no fence around the White House at the time. And I suspect if you were just alert, you could walk in when there wasn't anybody watching. So that there was a lady who had made her way into the White House and claimed that she had the illegitimate child of Herbert Hoover. And what I found fascinating, and also at the time, it wasn't always, they had, maybe they still do, but they had a White House police unit as well that wasn't technically Secret Service. But regardless, here's this woman who starts yelling that, Herbert Hoover is the father of her illegitimate child, and they take her to a room and spend like 3 hours trying to talk her down and figure out who she is and what's going on. I can't imagine that kind of response today. I would sort of think that person would be down on the ground with the handcuffs on and being shepherded out, where these guys are taking their time and and it turned out she was a person who had managed to get away from, she had some mental health issues and managed to get away from the place that she was staying and made her way into the White House.
Okay. Well, Gary asked, are there any traces of the fire visible today?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
It was just, as far as I understand, it was just the exterior walls, and they really had to redo everything inside. I can't imagine it would be scorching or whatever, I think, and that's not that hard to cover up.
Okay.
And there's been a number of renovations, since then. So,
okay.
but I don't believe that there's. That would be great if there was, but I don't think so.
Okay. Well, and then
the
we
story
have,
would be better known probably, because they'd have
it probably would be, yes. So we also have someone asking, is there, and I think that there's, you probably know the story on this. Is there any truth to the made-for-TV movie about the kids going to Hoover to plead for the release of their dad serving a prison term during the holidays?
Well, they're from Michigan and I'm from Michigan, and I know this. I know the story pretty well, actually. Yes, there is truth to that story. I've been trying to research it and find out the final outcome. But essentially, their father had been put in jail. The police claimed, and he claimed that a friend of his had him drive his friend's car to Detroit to sell it because it would be easier to sell in Detroit. And the police thought he had stolen it. And well, what happened was he was incarcerated until they figured out. I mean, I don't know why they didn't get a hold of the person and be able to verify that right away, but they weren't. So he was in, it's a depression. He's got a number of kids, can't make any money for him while you're in prison. And they'd actually approached the Michigan governor first, or the Michigan Attorney General of Michigan, who refused to let him out. And really, they just wanted to be let out until the court date was. And I think it was a 16-year-old daughter who appealed to the governor of Michigan and the governor of Michigan let him out. But as he was leaving prison, federal people were there and arrested him again immediately. And so they got free train tickets, and they did go to Washington, D.C., and they did meet with Herbert Hoover. And he did order the release of their father until the court date. And there's a really interesting account from one of his secretaries who has a diary, because Hoover doesn't have diaries, and he talks about how shaken he thought Hoover was, and he felt that Hoover turned away from him because he was tearing up a little bit after he heard their story, and he didn't want him to see that. But I haven't been able to find out, and I've even talked to some colleagues in Michigan, is there's national news coverage of the children asking for this, but I haven't found anything about what was determined at the court hearing. Was the guy guilty or not? I don't know. Now, the made-for-TV movie switches it. It was not at Christmas time, so they did a number of things to make it pull at your heartstrings a little bit more that were not accurate. And so anyway, so it is an interesting story, I think. But I still, before I retire, I got to find out what happened to that guy.
Well, Tina asked, were the documents regarding state or national affairs or was it just personal papers in his office?
Well, I think it was more the day-to-day business stuff. I mean, there was personal papers there for sure, but and I do think maybe there probably was, because I believe it was before, but they were beginning to talk about the London Naval Treaty and such, which was actually caused a little, when he took over General Pershing's office, not surprisingly, there was a lot of military paraphernalia in the room decorating it. And Hoover was expecting to be meeting with people to talk about this upcoming conference. And so he had it all removed. It's sort of how ironic it would be, oh, we're here to talk about peace, but we're in a room with, generals and paintings of battles and stuff. So I do think that there were probably some important documents in that fireproof safe and some of the cabinets, which is why, they were so keen on getting that stuff. So I think they prioritize, like we would do, if there were a fire at the library. We have a plan where there's certain items that are prioritized that you get out first in case you don't have time to get everything out. You're going to get the most important things out first. But I have not heard of anything that was of significant value to affairs that were going on at the time that was lost.
I see. Okay. Very, very good. Oh, and then Delene is asking is if you could identify that group in front of the Christmas tree at the beginning of the program. Do you know who any of those people are?
Well, that's actually, there's to the far left, I believe is, it's one of the sons. I'm thinking since he's by two of the grandkids that it might be Herb Jr., but I don't see them well enough to know which one's that looks more like Alan though. So my guess is that's Alan, and the two of the grandkids, and Lou's above them, and Herbert Hoover's in the middle. Margaret Hoover is on the right, and probably Herb Jr. there as next to her. I don't know the name of the guy in the uniform. And to be totally honest, this couldn't find a shot of the 1929 tree, so this is actually slightly later in his term.
Okay.
I think this is either 31, I think, or 32, but it's still illustrative. It's the same community tree. I just didn't have one specifically from 1929 to show.
Okay, very good. Question 2 is, so they moved back into the West Wing in April after repairs were made. Were they completely done then, or was that just temporary and more?
No, I believe that was completely done. He had gone in and inspected. There's pictures of him going in and inspecting it the day before they moved in. And like I said, And we're talking Washington, D.C., so it must be a blessing to have air conditioning.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, and then, it's interesting, we always get plenty of help. Annette Dunlap is on the call, and she says that there were actually only 2 grandchildren in 1929, Peggy Ann and Herb the third. So Joan wasn't born until 1929 or till 1930. So
Okay, that's why there's only 2 in the, I didn't see 3 in the picture there, so maybe before Joan comes.
Well, and
But thank you, Annette.
yes, and for those that don't know Annette, we've had her out to present at the library many times, and she's researched a lot. And I think there should be a book coming pretty soon, I think, on Lou Henry Hoover, if I recall. So anyway, by Annette. So anyway, got just one last question then, and actually it's probably not a question, it's more of a comment. Somebody said the beams were actually from Calvin Coolidge removal during a renovation, and that Lou had salvaged them and they were repurposed in Christmas gifts from a company in North Carolina where Herb Jr. was recovering from TB. So
okay,
anyway, so
I don't claim to be an expert on all these things, so
I tell you what, Craig,
we learn something every time I give a presentation.
So many helping hands. This is we've had more questions on this program than any we've had for a third Thursday. So obviously people are really interested in it, and just want to, that's really all the time we've got for questions now. And I'd really like to thank Craig for joining us tonight and just for an excellent presentation, as you can see. And I'd also like to thank the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library and Museum, the Hoover National Historic Site, and all of the public libraries who helped make tonight's program a success. And of course, I'd encourage you all to come visit the Hoover campus and enjoy a walk around the park and explore the historic buildings. And for now, the Presidential Library remains closed to the public, but the staff is working behind the scenes for a gradual reopening. The National Historic Site grounds and historic buildings are now open. However, the Visitor Center remains closed for the time being, as well as the Friends Meeting House and Prairie Trails, as they are under construction as crews work on a flood mitigation project along the creek, which is coming along very, very well. The Birthplace Cottage, Blacksmith Shop, Schoolhouse, and Graveside are open until 5 p.m. And of course, the Hoover Presidential Foundation staff is hard at work here and ready to assist you with your membership needs or year-end charitable gifts in support of the Hoover campus. And we even have gift memberships you can give during the holidays. Just call or email us with any needs you may have. And again, don't forget to register for next Thursday's Third Thursday program about the origins of the presidential cabinet. The links are now open on our website and Facebook pages. And on behalf of all of us here at the Hoover campus and the participating public libraries, we want to thank you for joining us, and we wish you a wonderful holiday season and look forward to seeing you on your next visit to the Hoover campus. Good night.